So there's been a lot of discussion. We're going to go here for a little bit for this first segment, different than normal. There's been a lot of discussion in regards to all the different champions we've had. We're going to have, for the first time in NBA history, 7 different champs in 7 different seasons, right? And there's a lot I could go on here about. I've said multiple times in the past, I think part of what is showing in this era is that we don't have that true all-time pantheon guy. And that's not to be disrespectful to Jokic or disrespectful to Giannis. I think the world of Giannis, I think Jokic is easily the best player in the league. We have some all-time greats. But when you transition out of, we don't have a Magic who won 5 titles, or a Bird who won 3 titles. We don't have a Jordan who won 6. We don't have a LeBron or a Curry who's won 4, or a Kobe with 5, or a Duncan with 5. Those true all-time top 10 guys who are stacking up all the titles. That's been the history of the NBA. And I think when you get into that next tier of guys, again, those are the top 10 players to ever play the game. The best of the best, the greatest we've ever seen. When you get into that next tier of guys, still all-time greats, but just not quite there. You've got your Hakeem, who gets 2. Giannis, I think, is in that category, who's got 1. Jokic in that category, who's got 1. Maybe one day we'll look back and Jason Tatum will be in that category. Now he's got 1. And whoever wins this title, which most likely it looks like the Thunder, so SGA, maybe he ends up in there when his career's all said and done. He gets 1. The lack of having those guys, those all-time top 10 Pantheon guys, is that you're going to see more and more of this. A team only win 1 title. I do think there is also the problem with the product that is currently on the NBA floor is really hard to win more than 1 title. So think about this. Growing up, depending on your age, this isn't going to apply to you. But for me growing up, one of the biggest things was you can't shoot too many jumpers. You can't shoot too many threes. You had to have a post game. And the reason is because you could not consistently produce the same thing night in, night out, the same product, the same offense, by shooting a bunch of jump shots, shooting a bunch of threes. It would lead to inconsistencies, it would lead to bad shooting nights, and that would lead to losing games, losing playoff series. And then we had this guy, Steph Curry, come in the league. The greatest shooter ever, and it's not particularly close. We will debate and argue everything in sports. One of the few things we don't argue is Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of a basketball that we've ever seen. Any of us, it doesn't matter your age group, it doesn't matter when you started watching the game. Steph Curry is by far and away the best shooter in basketball. Excuse me. And so, because what he was doing with his teams was just shooting the shit out of the ball, and they were winning playoff series, titles, winning 50, 60 plus games, 70 games. It changed our view and our perspective on all of this stuff. Now, when you see teams like the Celtics, who made more threes than any Steph Curry-led team, made the most threes in NBA history, what does that create? And they shot a good percentage, but because they're not exactly Steph and on those Warriors teams when they were really dynamic and at the peak, what they had Clay, Kevin Durant, 2 of the other 3 or 4 greatest shooters of all time. Because they're not them, the Celtics team, despite how many they made and such a high volume, they were susceptible to, they could go cold, they could miss some, that could lose them a game or showed to lose them a series. Charles Barkley, this is one of those famous things he used to say for years and years and years. You can't win a championship shooting jumpers. And while you might have a run, like the Bucks, when they won, there was enough shooting around Giannis being dominant inside. They were able to get a title. Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, they had enough shooting around Giannis to get them a title. Jokic and the Nuggets, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., KCP, Jokic himself. They had enough shooting, they could get on a run, they got themselves a title. This Celtics team last year, and there's shot the shit out of the ball, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday, Porzingis, Derek White, they got themselves a title. That product seems to work for every team besides exactly the greatest shooter ever and two of the other greatest shooters ever. That seems to work for about 1 year. And now, with that being said, I also want to discuss this, and that this style does inherently hurt ratings and the product on the floor, or the discussion around, does it hurt ratings and product on the floor? So ratings have been a constant conversation in the world of sports and these pro leagues. The NFL is just beating everybody up, and it's not even particularly close. The NFL is the most watched thing on television, and that's and I know NBA people love to say, well, NBA numbers aren't as big because people are illegally streaming games. People are illegally streaming NFL games too, and they still put up ridiculous numbers. When it comes to the product that these teams put out, I've said this a bunch of times too throughout the year, there's an art of watching sports that we want to watch superhuman people do superhuman things. And while I might know and you might know at your core, you can't really go into an NBA game and shoot 30, 40 threes and make however many of them to win the game, and you couldn't really play the style that has become the modern NBA. But it looks like you could. It absolutely looks like you could. You just dribble down. You could dribble a basketball. You go down the court. You're at the three-point line and you make one pass, two pass, boom, shoot a three. To the average person, that looks like you could do it. And I think that hurts. You don't watch an NFL game and go, oh, I could do that. I could do what Derrick Henry does. I could do what Myles Garrett does with these really elite NFL players. I could do what Patrick Mahomes does. There's that art of these people are superhuman. These people are Superman. These people are bigger, stronger, better, faster than me. That we just like. It's that old school gladiator feel. That old school, man, look what these guys are doing. And so that, I believe, hurts the product, especially during the regular season. Well, now let's look at the playoffs. The playoffs, and this is, we're trying to address everything with the NBA here. The playoffs, one of my big issues is there's clearly an agenda here when it comes to the referees. And I'm not going to say this is whoever wants to instill this. I don't know if this is the referees. I don't know if this is Adam Silver, the league as a whole. We're going to be more physical. Okay. Because physicality is something that's always been in the NBA. It feels like it's been removed as the hand check was pulled out of the game and other things to make the game become less physical, more open, more shooter friendly, and that has helped. But there's also an easy argument to say that it's hurt. And in the NBA playoffs, again, OKC took advantage of this. They're like, hey, look, we're going to put Alex Caruso on Jokic because we know human nature, the little guy guarding the big guy, the little guy can just flat out get away with more fouls, get away with more contacts. I know Nuggets fans are really upset, but that's the reality of it. Shaq used to get fouled all the time, but he was so much bigger than everybody that they weren't going to call every foul because Shaq didn't even react the same to every foul. If you gave Shaq the same calls as other players, well, Shaq would be the all-time leading scorer and would be close, even if you only hit 50% of his free throws. When you see the upped physicality in the NBA, in the playoffs, Now, I don't think it should be totally just agenda-based that, okay, we're just not going to call fouls, or we're just not going to call this type of foul, or I think the refs, if you want to allow a certain style, that's fine, but just be consistent to what you are going to call and what you are not going to call. Ratings for the NBA, a huge part of why they're down, and a huge part of why we're having all these different champions. Because the product on the floor what people want to watch, and is the product on the floor something that we want to champion as an NBA champion? And this goes back multiple years. Again, we loved, even if we hated the way the team was built because it felt like an inevitability, we loved how the Warriors looked when they played basketball. We loved how it looked. It was the exciting version of the Spurs. The Spurs forever were boring with Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, but their offense, to a basketball purist, was actually pretty exciting. There was motion, they had movement, they had a style of offense. Duncan in the post with a bunch of different post moves. Parker, Duncan, pick and roll, Ginobili. Like, that team was boring because it was in San Antonio and there wasn't a lot of personality, but the actual style of basketball was interesting, exciting. The Warriors took that same style, but they were exciting. Steph had flair. Klay Thompson was much more likable early in his career. Draymond was much more likable early in his career. That was an exciting team. Kevin Durant when he got there. Now the product, and the best way to identify the problem with the product of the current NBA game is this OKC Thunder should not be the team that wins the title. Now, they probably will. They're better than everybody. But here's just the biggest issue. And again, there's a lot here. Say what you want about how physical the game is now, or what's a touch foul, what's not. But the problem with the Thunder, and the problem with this, again, agenda potentially that the refs have, is it's got to be league-wide. Everybody's got to play with these rules. The Thunder play really great defense. They do. The Thunder are also allowed to play an entirely different game than the rest of the NBA, apparently. The NBA playoffs has been discussed heavily in regards to the physicality, in regards to how many fouls they're not calling, the physicality that they are employing, all this stuff, right? Except, and the Thunder are probably the best example of it. The Thunder Nuggets series was super, super physical. Except one guy continues to get away with, if you touch him or you're in his space, even if he initiates the contact, he's still getting the fouls called. Everybody else is getting less fouls called. There's just free throws, except for one guy. And that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And SGA is a great player. SGA is my MVP choice. The Thunder are the best team in basketball. But if they had to play defense against themselves, how fast would Alex Caruso and Lou Dort foul out if they had to play against SGA? The product of the game of basketball and what makes it so different from the game of football is the NFL, and we watch a lot of bad quarterbacks. We watch a lot of bad teams, and we still go out there and watch them in droves. In baseball's resurgence, the Rockies are potentially the worst team of all time. And there's 30,000 people a night just about going to watch the Colorado Rockies. The Thunder, if we put that on the NBA final stage, Shai, who, yes, has an amazing handle, has a great mid-range. Also, when he really needs to, puts his head down, throws his body into somebody, and now, and this was You can go look at the highlight. I can't show it. But what he has really perfected is this happened on Jaden McDaniels last night. He puts his foot in between yours, and he is initiating the contact. So when you fall and trip, they give that as a foul, and they are cautious and on behalf of the offensive player. And so he is stumbling. He is putting his head into you. Again, look at game 7 there, and the way they play defense. Aaron Gordon got a foul, and they wanted upgraded to a flagrant because he ripped the ball through, which something they teach you. When someone's in your space, rip the ball through. Because the Thunder, for whatever reason, Caruso and Dort are allowed to stick their hands in there, push you, be as physical as they want, and we're not calling a foul. But if you are any kind of touch foul to SGA, we're calling it. And that is different than how they've treated everybody else in the playoffs. So if we're going to have physicality, and this is going to be the product we want to put out there, keep it across the board. It's what makes them unlikable. Like, they might be the best team, and they probably are, and they will probably win the title. And there are things about the OKC Thunder that are commendable. I think there is sometimes a little too much love given to Sam Presti, and I do think he has to win a title in order to justify his spot of greatest GM ever, which a lot of people want to give him. But this is an unlikable team. And I say all this to say, this is the culmination of what has become a very unlikable product in the NBA. You can't have every team trying to go out there and shoot threes. Okay, cool. You can't have a guy who puts his head down and trips and gets foul calls and free throws his way to 30 points a game. You can't have, this is why Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves, who are my pick, would be great for the NBA. There's a little bit of everything. You have this old school big defender, all-time defender, Rudy Gobert. You have this dynamic guard, Anthony Edwards. You have a great coach. You have depth. You have shooting. You have bench play. They do pretty much everything you would want to promote in the game of basketball. The Pacers even would also fit this. I've been wrong about the Pacers all off-season or all postseason. The Pacers also fit this. But the product of basketball needs to be better. If we're going to continue the way the NBA is going, we need this to be better. Yes, there's parity, but even the NFL, which gives you, the NFL gives you quote unquote the idea of parity, and we're still excited to go. People get excited to watch their 7 and 10 teams, their teams that are 6 and 11, or now they're 7 teams, so 6 and 11, a 7 and 10 team. People still get excited to watch those teams. Versus in the NBA, who's excited to watch their middling team? Who's excited to watch these potential final matchups?